Everyone. So this section we're going to be looking at today is on African art. And we are looking specifically at African art before Western influence. So what was happening in Africa before colonialism, before the Europeans came to South Africa and Africa. So we find out about history in two different ways, but with two different experts. The one is anthropologist and the other one's archaeologist. So an anthropologist looks at people. So they study the behaviors, the cultures, paintings, engravings, tools to actually find out how those people were living. The archaeologists are the people who actually dig in the ground. So they are looking at tools, skeletons, things that they find within the Earth's crust to actually figure out what these people were doing. The two experts use different methods to find out about our history. So the first one is carbon dating. They measure the amount of carbon left in an artifact. So as you decompose, you end up with less and less carbon-14. And by measuring the amount of carbon-14, they can actually figure out how old you are or how old that artifact is. Then stratigraphy. So stratigraphy, they use the layers of Earth. So they look at, if we look at this image on the side here, the different layers will be different years old. So the deeper they dig, the older it gets. Paleography, they look at writing. So they look at hieroglyphics. They look at things that are actually written and painted on objects. And lastly, typology. So they look at things that are the same kind of object. So if it's a stone tool, they look at that stone tool compared to a different stone tool, and they can figure out how old those objects are. Right, now you're going to do activity 2.1 in your theory book. So you are going to think about what is the oldest thing that you've ever seen. It can be in a museum, it could be something that your grandparents have, something that you have seen. Then you are going to say whether it belonged to an old person or was it in a museum. Was it part of an environment? So maybe it was painted onto a wall. Maybe it was something that was part of that place that you were at and it couldn't be removed. So like a building or a monument. Report about the object or the construction. So how was it made? Mention the possible age. So how old do you think it is? The material, so what it was made out of. The purpose, so what was it used for? And the appearance, what does it look like? And lastly, you are going to draw a picture into your theory book of that object. So now we're going to look at the different ages. So if we look at the ages, we're looking from the Stone Age. Okay, so we're starting there, and we can see the oldest that it is. Remember, BC, the higher the number, the older it is. So we're looking from 1700 BC. So if we look, the Neolithic period, 700 BC, will be in this top layer here. Okay, so we aren't actually going all the way back down to dinosaurs. We are still looking only in this top percentage. So it's still very new in comparison to the world's history. Okay, so the Paleolithic period was from 40,000 to 10,000 BC. Again, remember, 40,000 is going to be older than 10,000. And there we had the nomadic man. Nomadic meaning that he actually walked around. He didn't actually have a house. He would walk from place to place, try to get food, sleep in caves, and was constantly moving depending on where the food and where the water was. He would have engraved, painted on stone, bone, and ivory. Ivory being like elephant tusks. And then they used crude tools, so tools that they had made themselves, very, very basic tools, and they had animal skin clothes. Remember that whatever they made had to either be carried with them or left behind. So they didn't have a place to store all their nice little art. They had to actually carry everything with them. The next thing is the Mesolithic period from 10,000 BC to 3,500 BC. So this is where we start getting community life. So the people started actually making houses and setting up little communities. Their houses would have been made out of reeds, which is like grass, and clay. So using the actual earth, you can find clay in the earth, and mixing that with reeds and building their houses. It is the start of agriculture, so farming. They were actually planting their own food now, and domestic animals, not as in a nice little dog, as in cows and cattle and sheep that they could actually eat. And then woven clothes. So then they started going from the animal skins, where they would just basically take the animal skins and wrapping them in a way that they would cover themselves, to woven clothing. So now they start actually designing their clothes and making them. The Neolithic period, so that is from 3,500 BC to 1,700 BC. And this is where we have our villages. So the villages have cultivated fields, large stone structures. So you can see the buildings have become more established. Now we actually have hierarchies. We have a chief and we have the villagers, and everybody has their roles. And lastly, the Bronze Age. So this is from 2000 BC. So you can see that there would be some overlap between the Neolithic period and the Bronze Age. So what would happen is that they would start finding that copper, which they could find in the earth, and tin, which they could find in the earth, if they mixed them together. So they would heat them up over fire, melt them down, and mix those two metals together, they would get a metal called bronze. And bronze could make their weapons much harder. So then they started making weapons like swords, arrowheads to actually hunt with. And then they also started making little sculptures with that. Again, we have the same kind of community as we had in the Mesolithic and Neolithic periods. So people were living together in settlements during the Bronze Age. Not nomadic, they had houses. The next thing that came was the Iron Age from 700 BC. Okay, so if you want to find out more about the timelines, there is a video as well about how BC and AD works. Just briefly, BC, before Christ or before Common Era, and then AD would be after that. So the AD would be our life now. Okay, so the Iron Age is when they started discovering iron. So iron was then exported to Europe in 700 BC, and iron replaced bronze. So they could do geometric patterns, birds, animals, and birds again, using in their decoration. So they could actually make little figures and forms and decorate a bit more. Okay, so now we're moving on to Paleolithic sculpture. So looking back at in the Stone Age, starting here, right at the beginning. Okay, so 40,000 to 10,000 BC, Paleolithic period. In our Paleolithic period, we're looking at the start of the representation of the human figure. So one of the very, very first sculptures and representations of the human form is called the Venus of Willendorf. So this is actually European, not South African, or not African. Okay, and this is our very, very first representation of a female body. So you can see straight away, as soon as you look at it, there are certain aspects that you can see are exaggerated, like her stomach, her boobs are very enlarged, and her face is completely ignored. Okay, and this would have been a symbol of fertility. So because it was representing fertility, that's what they exaggerated. They exaggerated the breast for the feeding of children, exaggerated the stomach, so the carrying area for the children. Even her genitals are slightly enlarged to show that reproduction and fertility. Okay, so this was carved out of stone. It was actually quite small because it's during our nomadic period, if you remember. So it was nomadic. So the man was moving around. He was not able to keep things. So this was small enough that he could put it into a pocket that he would have created in his animal skin. So it's something that was quite easy, something small enough to hold in the hand. So it's approximately 11.5 centimeters high. If you think of a ruler is 30 centimeters. So it is smaller than half a ruler. So it's quite a small little figure. It is made, like I said, to fit within the palm of the hand. So it actually forms nicely or holds nicely in the palm of your hand. It was found in Austria. So again, like I said, not African, but it is important because it was first representation of the human figure that they've found. Again, like I've just said, and it consists of spherical shapes, so shapes that are rounded or oval. So if we look here, I've highlighted them in green. We've got the belly, which is a nice oval, the boobs, the head, the thighs. So all of those are oval shapes. There is lack of any delineation of the face. So like I said, the face is completely ignored. It's not important. The beauty in the Paleolithic time would have been about her ability to carry children. So that is the beauty, not about her face. Her stomach, thighs, and breasts are enlarged and exaggerated. Her head bears a pattern showing some sort of hairstyle. So there might have been something representative of the way that the people who made it would have had their hair. Identity and anatomical detail are important to the birth process are exaggerated. So again, like I said, things that are important to the birth process. So things that would help you to bear children, to feed children, that was what was important. The arms are reduced to bands over her breasts. If I take away all these arrows, you can see the arms come down and they're basically like resting on the tops of her boobs. So those lines there are actually her arms. So again, not very important. And she has bracelets going down her arms, also representing what the people of the time would have been wearing or how they would have been representing. There is a strong three-dimensional feeling. So it is a 360 view. So it's all the way around. And she has no feet. So again, it is not important. She is a votive figure. So she's a representation of something. She's symbolic. And she's supposed to be carried in the hand of a pregnant woman to ensure that the birth of a healthy baby as a valued new member to the tribe. So it's basically like a good luck charm. So if a woman was pregnant, she would carry this little figure to make sure that she would be safe during her pregnancy and the baby would be healthy. And then just a question to ask you is, why do you think it is known as the Venus of Willendorf? Who was Venus? Okay, so Venus was the goddess of fertility and love, and she was actually a Greek goddess. Okay, but throughout art history, the word Venus has been a representation of fertility and of womanhood. Okay, so she is a representation of the female figure, and Willendorf because she was founded in a place called Willendorf. Right, I'll continue this in the next video.